Welcome. My name is Reyes Gonzalez. I have the privilege of being the president of St. Augustine College, where we focus in transforming Latino lives through knowledge. Today, we have a very special guest. We are starting the celebration of Women's Month. And today we're honoring and celebrating and acknowledging the great value and accomplishment of women. We all know that women are the nucleus of our society. And for those of us that are Latinos, we also recognize that the women are our mothers and our sisters, play an enormous role in our families. And today we have a very distinguished guest. She has a wonderful trajectory. As she will tell us, she came from South America, and she has been the majority of her life here in the United States. But just like most Latinas that come to the United States, she had her struggles, but nevertheless, she has been able to overcome the many struggles in her life. And she's going to tell us about the many challenges that she had, and also how she was able to become who she is today. Andrea, welcome to St. Augustine College, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzalez. I am thrilled to be here. Congratulations to St. Augustine for your 40th anniversary, and thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for many weeks.
Thank you very much. But before we get started with some of the questions that we have for you, we would like to learn a little bit about your life journey and how is it that you came to the United States, and how was it that you became who you are?
Whew, that's a big question. But something I've been thinking a lot about is it's not been a linear path. It's been one that has had lots of, going sideways a little bit, going backwards, going forward, going up and going down. And my family is from Quito, Ecuador. I was born in Quito. And when I was about 5 years old, my parents, who were business owners in Quito, had their business failed. They ran out of money. It didn't work out so well. So my dad had been in the US military in the 60s. He'd moved to the US as a young man, was drafted into the US Army, served, and through that became a US citizen. So we had the real privilege of being able to pick up at that point our little family and move to California when I was 5 years old. And in my parents' telling of the story, and apparently I believed this too when I was a little kid, we were only going to stay for a couple of years. It was, let's move to California, let's save some money, and then let's go back home, open a new business, get back on our feet. Well, as you know, the bills pile up, and the save a little money never happened. My sister was born here. Then my aunts and uncles started coming and living with us and staying. My grandparents came. So it's just we never made it back. Now, more than 40 years later, we're still here. And my
those
mom,
2 years are not over yet, huh?
No, those 2 years we might go back. I don't know. And now that I ask my mom, okay, you're retired now, do you want to go back home to Quito? She's torn, right? Quito's not home anymore. It's a totally different place than when we left it 40 years ago. She's a totally different person than when she left it 40 years ago. So, our hearts are in two places. So I grew up in LA. My family was, they were just working hard. So often my dad had 2 jobs. I remember for a time he had 3 jobs. They really prioritized my education and well-being. So I feel very grateful to them for that. They always encouraged me. I loved school. I loved learning. So that for me was sort of like the path, right? Just keep going, keep learning, keep enjoying it, keep doing well. So I went to college. There was never any sort of doubt from my parents' mind that they would move mountains, do whatever it took to get me through college. So I went right after high school to college and finished a degree in Latin American studies. I really was following my heart, my interests, my passions. And, I think the the positive of the way that I grew up and how it's influenced my career is how hard my parents always worked. There was never any question of just get up every day and go and do it and get it done and be responsible. The downside and the tough part was that I didn't see anybody in my family working in fields that really brought them fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
It was really just a job and a paycheck, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a responsibility, you do it, and that's it. And so in my youth, I didn't really know that you could have a fulfilling career. I really just thought there was work and then there was the stuff that brings you joy, and they're separate. So even in college, I didn't really think about connecting what I was learning in college to a career path. It was really, I felt honored and privileged to be able to just spend time learning and studying things that I thought were important and interesting. I studied history, I studied literature. I took the time to improve my Spanish because I had lost some of it growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so after college, I just took a job, like any job,
Mm-hmm.
hourly wage, temp agency job was what I did right after college. But on the side, I kept doing the things that brought me joy. I
Mm-hmm.
volunteered with nonprofit organizations. At that time, right after college, I was living in San Diego, California, and I was volunteering for an organization that provided support and advocacy for the maquiladora workers who lived across the border in Tijuana. And it was an organization that organized both aid in terms of, food and nutrition assistance and health care, but also brought the conditions, the working conditions in the maquilas themselves to the attention of labor activists in the United States. And because I was bilingual, I was able to accompany people to the communities in Tijuana and serve as an interpreter as a volunteer, and also then work like in the office, helping stuff envelopes and fundraising appeals and things like that. And that was what I did in my spare time. It wasn't until later that I met people who were working in a nonprofit organization, and that was their full time job. And they got to do this work that was important for the well being of their community and get a paycheck for the work. And that was something that was new to me in later after college, in my 20s. And that really came to light for me in Philadelphia. I moved to Philadelphia from San Diego a little bit after college, and found work there at a community-based organization called Congreso de Latinos Unidos.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my late 20s. I still didn't quite understand how to put together a career, but I understood that there was an organization that was serving the Latino community in Philadelphia, that was living, in that community in North Philadelphia, living in really extreme poverty. And I felt like I could contribute in some way to the well-being of that community by working at this organization. I got hired and involved in the workforce development and adult education programs.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to go pretty deep into figuring out how to make the career services system in Philadelphia work for Latinos and work for Spanish speaking Latinos primarily, who were not being served by the regular kind of downtown
Mm-hmm. we have some technology difficulties, but there we are.
I'm so sorry. It seems my internet is down. We were just talking about the fact that internet
We were
is
just
not always
talking about
available
it.
in Chicago, and here I go.
Yes. It's we were just saying that, like you just mentioned, that even though technology, Chicago has so much technology, continues to have challenges with the internet. And I imagine also, yes, our students and everybody else that has to deal with it. But we're back, and
We're
so
back.
thank you. And yeah, so very interesting life. So tell me, so you started your career, or given it seems like you spend a lot of your time helping others. How do you think that uh, came about? Is that something that was you were just born with that desire to help others, or is that something that you just realized and throughout your life that there was a need and to help others, and that you found fulfillment in that?
I mean, two things. I think one, it definitely was, by example with my family. So I mentioned earlier this notion that, when we moved to the States, when we moved to California, well, then, my mom's younger brother wanted to come. And so he lived with us. And then my mom's sister came, he lived with, and they stayed with us as long as they needed to. And my dad helped them find work and so it's the natural thing to do, right? You just help one another. And I think we all have seen that example in our families. I think it's a cultural value in many of our communities. And I think that was part of it, right? You
Mhm.
just sort of, it comes naturally. You just help each other.
Yeah. And did it come also naturally to you to realize that your heart wasn't given? Because you're very fortunate in the sense that there are many of us that go through life and it's not realizing really what we love, not really finding ourselves and knowing that what we really enjoy and what we're called to do on this earth. Many times,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, we work as a way to support ourselves and our families, and not necessarily as a fulfillment, as being part of life. It's just something that you do on the side.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think the other thing that's maybe more, a personal thing is I also feel like the fact that I saw what life was like in Ecuador, I saw what life was like here, and was able to make some real comparisons about, okay, what makes it possible for my family to earn a living here and have the life that we have
mhm,
that didn't exist? What were the conditions that didn't exist in Ecuador? Like seeing those inequities, I think from an early age also spoke to me and my
mhm,
sense of like justice and what's right. And I felt like if I can have some role in creating a more just world,
mhm,
whatever way. And so I feel like all of my work has been an attempt to do that from one perspective or another,
mhm.
right?
Yes.
But I do think it's from that privileged
Mhm,
perspective of being able to see the world through different lenses, right? Through my
mhm.
parents' lens, through my grandparents' lens, through then my own, and sort of seeing some of the huge inequities
Yes.
that exist.
Yeah. You mentioned the word inequity, and that's something that we know that impacts us, not only Latinos, but especially Latino women. Tell me, what have you experienced? What inequities have you experienced throughout your life, or what are your views on the? I often say that even our founders, over 250 years ago, they didn't think that their mothers, sisters, and wives were equal. They didn't allow them to vote, and that is, I can't fathom. How is it that
Yeah,
our founders did not think that their mothers and sisters were equal to them? So, what inequities
yeah.
have you experienced throughout your career and your life?
So, it's really interesting because two things. One, most of the fields I've worked in are dominated by women, right?
Mm,
Education, a lot of pieces of government, certain, kinds of nonprofits are mostly women.
hmm
But even in those environments, what we see today is the top job is still more likely to be held by a man, right?
Yes.
And so I ask myself, why is that? Because I, in my work life, haven't really experienced a lot of anything that felt like blatant sexism, right? I haven't felt like anybody thought I was less capable or kind of doubted whether I should be promoted because of that. I never experienced that directly. But what I do see is that we still have a long way to go as a society in creating the conditions that allow women to fully engage as leaders across all sectors, right? The fact that when you look at the statistics, the number of elected officials that are women and men is not equal. The number of CEOs of top companies is absurdly low. When you look at the women, all of that is still true. And so why is that? These are structural things. They're no longer the kinds of beliefs that maybe were held even 50 years ago, right? Beliefs that were common 50 years ago that somehow women are different and are less capable or too emotional. I don't hear any of that. I feel like probably my generation is the first generation of women that hasn't heard that from coworkers in the workplace as kind of a regular thing. But even without those attitudes being the norm, what is holding us back, from having an equal seat at the table? And a couple things like, we still talk about things like parental leave as a woman's issue. Well, you know what? Last time I checked, men could be parents too.
Of course.
And so why do we look at the mother as the one who's the caretaker and responsible for the well-being of their child when, like plenty of men are parents? Why don't we think about them as caregivers too? We talk about women and the fact that they're caring for their parents. Well, why wouldn't men need to care for their parents too? They also came from somewhere, So I just feel like right now it's these subtle things, and these subtle things and beliefs are still influencing our workplace policies, our leave policies, all kinds of things. And I do think that parental leave is a women's rights issue, but it's not a women's rights issue if you think about only applying the benefit to women. It becomes a women's rights issue when we expect men to take it as much as the woman takes it, right? You have a child, take time off to care for that child. It doesn't matter that you're a man. Of course you should care for that child. That's your child. So those are the next few steps I feel like we need to take as a society together to get to a place where women can really, fulfill their career aspirations and balance all of those familial responsibilities with their career aspirations, as men have been doing for generations,
Yeah. One other thing that intrigues me also is that, of course, as a college president, I encourage and I want everyone to get a college education. But now we see more women going into college and getting college education. And now we are encouraging saying, well, now wait a minute, that's not wrong. That's wrong. We should have equally just as many men graduating. So now we are concerned that men are not becoming as well educated as women.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting.
It's kind of intriguing to me that now all of a sudden that the roles are being reversed, and now it's an issue. And
yeah.
get me wrong. I'm in favor of everyone getting a college educated, but nevertheless, there's a lot of changes that are happening, but perhaps not at the rate that we would like to see them. And I do agree with you that there needs to be, we need to change our structure so that more and offer more opportunity to women, to get into these leadership positions. So we certainly have our job cut out for us, right? You mentioned also about a hallmark of Latinos, I believe, the Latino community, and that is we're hard workers. And I think that the majority of our students that come to St. Augustine, they have some of them multiple jobs. They have their parents, their grandparents, their children, and they still come into school because they know that school is the way of the future, as your parents well taught you. And but certainly you must have some obstacles. Well, before I ask that question, I know that you lived in multiple cities and you had multiple jobs. How did that all help you in shaping your career and who you are today? Would you recommend to other women to seek different opportunities until you find what you really love? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it depends. So I definitely have learned more about myself each job, right, that I've taken. And every time I have the opportunity to move to a new role, I've been better equipped each time to take a step back and think, okay, what do I know about myself?
Mm-hmm.
What do I know about what motivates me? What do I know about what I can do well? What do I know about the kind of environment where I'm happiest to be working? You know, what
Mm-hmm.
kind of people, what kind of places, and how well does that opportunity match up to those things?
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to do that multiple times, you definitely get better at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like each successive decision has been a better match to the things that are both fulfilling, and that I can do well, so
Mm-hmm.
that those two things continue to reinforce one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned it's become more common for people to have multiple jobs and even multiple kinds of careers in
Mm-hmm.
their lives. You know, in the last decade, I think that's become much more common.
Yes.
And so it's good, because I think it used to be maybe frowned upon, like, well, why did you leave? Why aren't you
Mm-hmm.
loyal? Why aren't you staying? I don't think most employers think about it that way anymore. I think we've all, now I'm an employer of many people, and now I know, you know, if someone's been somewhere for 4 years and they've done everything that they, you know, they've learned and they've grown and now they're ready for the next challenge, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as long as it's about that, it's about growth, it's about being clear about the things that are priorities for you in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
that changes over time too, right? So there, I think employers are much more willing to think about people just being honest with, you know, right now at this point in my life, I need more flexibility, right? I'm caring for family, I'm doing this. And so this is the kind of role that's going to make sense for me today. In
Yes.
5 years, that might be different, right? And so, you know, I've learned that I like roles where I have a variety of responsibilities. It's
Mm-hmm.
not one routine over and over again. I really like to go from one kind of thinking about one kind of problem solving to a different kind of thinking and a different kind of problem solving. And so I've searched for that in my career as I've grown and gotten closer and closer to that kind of right mix
Mm-hmm.
of activities and tasks. And so I would advise that people first really pay attention to what feels right to you, because your instincts matter and they're usually right.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to who you'll be working with, because at the end of the day, I think what I've found personally, but what I've read over and over again about people who are fulfilled in their jobs and versus those who aren't, it really, who you work with and who you report to often is the most important factor in that. So
Yes. Yes, I would agree with you. I think that it's not only very important for the person, but also to the employer as well, for people to experiment, and especially when they're younger in their careers, and move around so that they can identify the areas that they enjoy the most, and where not only that
mhm.
they enjoy, but also that where they can thrive, where they feel
Yeah.
comfortable, where they're making a difference. And sometimes we don't do that enough as Latinos. I can, think back about my first job. I spent 17 years there, and I think it was perhaps a little bit
Too
longer than
long?
I should have been. I think
Maybe
it's a
10
little bit
years
too
too
long,
long?
probably. But nevertheless, that's the way it was, and well,
Yeah.
hopefully, but
And when when you asked about obstacles and barriers, I do think that for me, that's an antidote to the biggest barrier that I feel like I had going into my
Mhm.
working life is this lack of exposure,
Mm,
lack of knowledge to what was possible, like the
mm,
realm of careers. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old, and I still meet people that are doing a very specialized kind of investment banking that I've never heard of before. Like, what is
yeah.
that? I didn't know
Yes.
people got paid to do that, right? But when I started out, I had very few um, careers that I'd actually seen up close
Hmm.
and that I really understood how they functioned. And so certainly early on, being able to, you don't always have to change jobs to do this. You can also just reach out to people who are doing work that you think is interesting, right? And ask them questions
Yeah.
about what they do and how it feels, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Because I had real lack of exposure
Mm-hmm.
to the variety of career paths that might have been available to me. And I had to figure it out, as they say, build the plane while flying it.
Yes.
Um, and one of the ways to do that is to try different roles and to move around. But another way really is just to talk to as many people as you have time and energy for,
Mm-hmm.
and to follow your curiosity and sort of try to get a sense of where you might, find happiness and find a good fit.
Yes. You bring up a very interesting point, and that is, who would have thought that someone that was studying Latin American studies would have become the CEO of one of the
Yeah.
big foundations in Illinois?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's yes, I don't see the alignment, but something happened in your life, and it wasn't like you develop a strategic plan. He says, well, okay, I'm graduating with uh, my degree in Latin American studies, and this is going to be my next job so that I can become the
Mhm.
CEO.
Right. You're totally right. And it really was just, okay, focus on the job you're in,
Uh-huh.
do it as well as you possibly can, learn about yourself while you
Hmm.
do that, learn about the things that feel fulfilling, feel the things that feel challenging, areas for growth, and then look around at like what else is going on around you that you might be interested in, and get to know people, and then think, okay, well, maybe the next thing will
Hmm.
be slightly different and will
Hmm.
help be closer to my strengths. And sort of that's been my path. It's kind of, what's the next thing? Okay, is it fulfilling from a social mission perspective? That's
Yes.
key to me. I'm not motivated by other things. I want to make sure that I feel like I'm contributing to something. Who
Uh-huh.
will I be working with? You know, and then is the day-to-day work the
Yeah.
kind of work that I'm good at and that's fulfilling? And then just keep tinkering with that over and over
Yeah.
again. And I landed here. Yeah.
What
There
a
was
great.
graduate school in between. I did go get a master's degree at Penn, as we talked about,
Yes.
and that was actually a funny story, because I was doing this work in a community-based organization, and I was managing a team of like 40 people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
managing a bunch of programs, raising money, like working on, advocacy for better workforce services for Latinos at a citywide level. I was doing a lot, but I didn't have a graduate degree. And most of my peers did.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a point where I thought, well, if I'm going to leave here ever, like, I have credibility in this organization to do this
Yes.
work, but if I'm ever going to be taken seriously anywhere else, I have to have that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked around and I applied for a lot of different programs. I ended up loving the one at UPenn in Philadelphia the most, so I didn't have to move cities for that.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I went to graduate school. And a little bit also because this is actually a funny story. I was managing these programs. I had a position that I was having a hard time filling,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought the salary was too low. And I said, this position on our team, the salary is too low. The other organizations that have these roles, they pay more. I don't think I'm going to be able to hire the right person if we don't, increase the salary. And I had this conversation with the chief financial officer of the nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And he made me so mad because he said, "Oh no, you don't understand. It's a finance thing. Like, we can't, da 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 da." He gave me some like
Yeah.
runaround,
Yeah, you
and
don't
I was
understand.
just
You
like,
don't know.
"I understand math. Like, what are you talking about?" And so I actually, when I went to graduate school, I
Yeah.
focused on finance,
No.
because I'm like, I'm never going to let anybody tell me I don't understand again. Like, am I a finance expert? No, but do I understand what's going on? Yes.
Yes, that's very interesting. And so it sounds that you would encourage others that want to advance in their career to pursue additional education, maybe graduate. Is that what you think? What you
I
say?
think so. I mean, I think it
Yeah.
depends a lot on the field.
Uh-huh.
It really depends on what kind of work you're doing. But particularly for kind of a management career where there's, some complex like policy systems or other I really think it helps. And I really enjoyed my graduate school
Mhm.
years, because I had been in the workforce for, a decade before I went. I had been working long hours. I had a lot
Mhm.
of responsibility. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. And then to be a student again, even though I had to work part time, it wasn't the same. The level of responsibility was different, and I was doing it for myself, and it was very fulfilling. So I enjoyed that time. So if you can manage to juggle it all, I would say keep going to school.
Keep doing, right? Yes.
Right? I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't gone as far as you have. I haven't done the PhD. That feels like a lot of additional education.
But you have had in your positions I think that additional learning comes from multiple ways in different ways for people. Where for me, I enjoy it, and I went to Penn as well. Uh, but with your experience and your knowledge that you have acquired throughout the multiple jobs that you had, I am certain that you know a lot more than I do in many areas. I'm sure you probably already obtained your doctorate degree just through learning on the job and just studying on yourself. So yeah, I'm very sure of that.
I've also taken advantage of, I just want to say, a lot of just professional learning opportunities that are a course that's 3 days or 5 weeks, or whenever I've had an opportunity to learn in that facilitated way for something that I can apply immediately at work, it's been really fulfilling and incredibly helpful. So I would say yes to as many of those as you can manage as well.
That's a great way to stay in touch with everything that is changing and everything that is happening in the world. Yeah. Andrea, was there someone or a group of people that just made a difference in your life and helping you become who you are? Is there, I know you mentioned your parents, and it sounds like your family certainly had a big contribution. Tell me about this.
So yeah, I mean, definitely my family, and I think that's not a surprise. I am very fortunate to have parents still who have always encouraged me, supported me, never made me feel like there were any limits to what I could do or accomplish. And I feel like that's been a huge factor in my own sense of myself. But that extends beyond my parents. As our families aren't just nuclear families. I'm, my aunts, my uncles, my parents, cousins, my grandparents, my, people who I'm related to. I don't even know how I'm related to them. They were all very positive. They were
We're all
just all very,
Latinos, we're all part of the same family.
we're all part of the family. And so all of those people, since I was a kid, just always feeling supported by this network of caring people, I feel like has made a huge difference in who I am. And then, as I've grown up and moved away from my family, so I haven't lived in a city where I had anybody I was related to in, 25, 30 years, right? So I've kind of had to build my own little families with friends and other people. And sometimes those friendships started in the workplace, or they would be, through other interests, but that's important. And then in terms of for my career growth, I've definitely run across so many people, many of them women, but not exclusively, right? Who I've just really admired because they've taken on responsibility in a social mission organization, whether it be a nonprofit or a government institution. They've demonstrated a real commitment to that work by working really hard and just really not being focused on the mission in all of their actions. And so that's really been inspiring, sort of being able to see it, right? Because that's, like I said, the big obstacle of not being able to see what was possible when I was in the workforce and I would see somebody doing what I thought was really inspiring and that I might want to do, and being able to be alongside them and sort of watch them do it, really learning by observation. And then there's this larger network of people who I've just reached out to over time when I got over my shyness about this, because I really didn't understand networking, how people do it, right? But the more I sort of started to myself realize that it really is just about forming human relationships. And if I'm curious about somebody or what they're up to, usually they want to talk about themselves. They don't mind, And so this larger network of people who, when I pick up a phone or send an email and say, would you mind spending, 20 minutes talking to me? I want to understand what you're working on, or I want to know more about what you do, have always said yes. I think that's made a huge difference, right? It's helped me like get a sense of what's possible. It's helped me kind of bounce some of my own ideas about my work or what's important with people whose life experiences have been very different from mine usually, right? And
Yes.
it's really broadened my perspective.
Yes, that's also a very good point that you making, and that is about the need of networking
Mm-hmm.
relationships, because there's always someone that even if, like you said, if you have a question, there's always someone that knows something about it, or someone else, and that's probably something that as Latinos we don't do enough. And I think that's something that we need to do more, and we need to introduce our students also to networking, and just for us to get out of this. And I don't know if it's part of our culture for us to be a little bit more cohibe, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because I don't know if it's the same thing in Quito, but in Mexico, sometimes I'll say it in Spanish. Well,
Yeah.
they'll say, hazte tú por allá, los niños no, esta conversación no es para los niños. Right, so they don't embrace us or include us in the converse. We're not included in. Well, we were not included when I was a child in the conversations.
Yes. Yes.
We were children. We didn't know better. Hopefully, things are changing. But there is. I still see a need for to help students to network.
Yeah.
So.
And and we're talking about adults, so it's like for me, I feel like the cultural barrier might be more around the lines of, not wanting to be a bother. No quiero molestar, no quiero, I don't want to take your time, no quiero quitar su tiempo. It's like this respect for other people's time and space and not wanting to intrude or,
Yeah.
and I just think we need to put that away because people typically welcome that kind of outreach, right? People want to make connections too. And you always have, like, they're going to learn from you too. Whatever your story is, it's going to be inspiring to them too. So
Yeah.
I just think, gaining a confidence that we should be engaging with other people, even people we don't know,
Mhm.
and that it's not a bother to them. We're not doing anything inappropriate.
Yes, that's right. Um, what what advice would you have for the younger generation of women uh, uh, if they want to get ahead? I mean, if they want to pursue a
Mhm.
career like yours or in the philanthropy area, how can they get involved? Or I certainly you had a very interesting
Yeah.
journey. I don't know if anybody else can follow it.
Yeah, there's definitely no formula
Uh-huh.
or path. But what I would advise is really, spend the time thinking about what really is important to you, and then find a way to live out those things in your work life, right? So what are your core values? What are the things? And then look for places that are going to support those. And there are so many options, and there are so many different places, and you won't see them, in an ad online necessarily. You will need to find them by talking to people, right?
Mhm.
So it goes back to that networking advice. And then the other thing for women, and this is maybe going to sound funny, but if you're going to spend your life with someone, find a life partner who's a feminist and who's going to support you and everything you want to do in your career, and is never going to make you feel like you're shirking your responsibility as a woman because you want to study or because you want to, move up in your career. Because just say no
The-
to those people who are not going to be supportive.
I, I don't know if there's going to be some Latino men that will say, "What is Andrea talking about?"
Exactly, exactly. If I made you uncomfortable, oh well. I'm just telling it like it is.
Too bad,
I'm just telling it like it
huh?
is. Because it's true. I mean, if I didn't have, a partner at home who was just as happy to pick up our kid from school or make the lunch or whatever as I am, none of this would work. It would
Yeah,
it would be really stressful.
yeah, yeah.
So
But I
all
think,
joking aside.
yeah. But I think that that part of our culture, I think that is changing somewhat,
Mhm.
which is rewarding that
My
men.
mom used to thank him. My mom used to say, "Oh, thank you for doing the dishes," or oh,
Yeah.
isn't that nice that you're changing your daughter's diaper? I'm like, it's his daughter. Why would he change her diaper? That's his child. And then she realizes now, she catches herself, oh no, okay, I'm sorry, that was silly. That's old fashioned of me. I didn't mean that. I get it.
But that, I think it goes also to part of our culture also.
Yeah.
I remember that when my mother was alive, and even at my age, if I went into the kitchen and wanted to serve myself, she would not allow me to serve myself. She wanted to serve me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was probably the way that she was raised, and that was the
Yeah.
culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Uh,
was her. That was her realm, right? That was her. That was her world. That was
yeah.
her responsibilities. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but fortunately things are changing now, and there's we're getting a little bit closer to more equality and
Mm-hmm.
between men and women. Like you said, that there's some ground to be covered yet.
Yes. Yes.
We're
There
moving in the
is.
right direction.
I agree.
Yeah, good, great. Is there I'll just ask this one last question, and then I wanted to open up the floor for some questions. Um, You mentioned a number of things that help you to achieve the success that you have, but are there anything, specific attributes or specific things that you can say that help you to achieve the success that you have? Uh, was it your assertiveness, or was it just your perspective of being explorative and flexible, or
Mm-hmm.
what comes to
Yeah.
mind when you think
That's it.
about what
Those are
helped
good questions. It's, I mean, I think persist. I don't know if persistence is it, but like this,
you?
the sense that just a curiosity, like a genuine curiosity about how things work, right?
Mhm,
So, okay, I'm working on this piece of the pie. What's happening over here? I'm
mhm,
curious. I want to understand how it all comes together, and
mhm,
feeling comfortable and confident pursuing that curiosity, right?
mhm,
I would say is one aspect. Um, and I think that goes a long way. I think, also this is, obvious willingness to work hard and put in the time that
mhm.
is needed to figure things out when they weren't so easy
Yes.
to figure out.
Mhm,
um, I've definitely had my moments of feeling like everything was going wrong and I wasn't getting things done, and oh my gosh, like I'm thinking about a time when I was managing a small nonprofit, and the economy crashed and we weren't meeting our budget, and there were just so many things that were going wrong, but feeling like I could focus on problem solving and sort of
mhm,
getting to the next step, right? And getting over a sense that I had to figure it all out by myself.
mhm,
That's been a big growth for me, and it goes back to the same kinds of ideas that would keep me from networking, is like keeping me from reaching out and asking for help.
mm.
Um,
So, would you recommend that other professionals like yourself maintain a mentor or someone with whom to bounce ideas, or what would you say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at least have two or three people that you feel, or even if it's one person, but it doesn't have to be as formal as a mentorship, but it
Mhm,
can be some people who you respect, who you feel like are
mhm,
gonna take a perspective that's helpful and productive, and ask them if it's okay for you to reach out from them to time and say, I have a problem in my
mhm,
workplace, or I'm trying to make a decision about my career and I'm not quite sure what to do. There's no reason for you to have all the answers yourself, right? And
mhm,
so figuring out how to have those relationships with people, and they change over time, who those people are and all of that, but feeling like you don't have to have all the answers and that it's
mhm,
okay to reach out and ask for help. What I've seen is that people at very high levels of many different kinds of organizations are doing that every day.
mhm,
They're reaching out to their peers, they're reaching out to their people in their network all day long, every day,
mhm,
to help sharpen their own perspective about what's in front of them, right? Because we all have blind spots and we'll always have blind spots no matter where we are in our career.
And I think that that's also something that is, and I often refer to Latinos because I'm one myself, and I can relate to the things that you're saying that
Mhm.
sometimes we just don't do enough because either we are afraid of being misconstrued, or it says, oh, no sabe nada, or just because, we often don't give ourselves enough credit, and we think that we're opening up ourselves too much to asking questions or asking help.
Mhm.
We don't ask
Mhm.
for help often
Yeah,
enough.
we think we have to do it all ourselves, and that's not how it works, you know?
Yes, thank you. But let me ask Rosendo if there are any questions from our audience that they may be interested in asking you. Rosendo, if you're listening to me, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have one question. The question is, what do you think of the power of mentoring? Do you have a mentor, or how mentorship work in your nonprofit world?
That's a wonderful question. And yes, I have had many mentors throughout, some again in a formal, hey, will you work with me over a period of time on these specific things? And that happened when I was working in education, and there was a formal match that, an organization that I had been a part of did a formal match between me and somebody at another organization who had a similar role to mine in an education organization and had been in that role for a long time, right? And the idea there was that there was a lot to learn to do the work I was doing, and that I realized I would need someone to bounce ideas off of over a long period of time. But I think the most significant mentorship relationships I've had have been very informal. And it really had started with me just seeing somebody whose work I admired, whose approach to work I admired, and reaching out to them and asking them if they would be willing to spend some time talking to me from time to time, and then me reaching out with questions from time to time. I think that I've seen, from the other side, mentorship programs in education in particular work really well when there's a clear agreement between the person being mentored and the person who's mentoring, like what the goals are. What are we trying to achieve together over a period of time? And how often should we check in with each other? But I've also seen an evolution of mentorship. And I've talked to a friend recently who works in the corporate environment. And I think this is coming into nonprofits too, but this idea that it's beyond a mentor, it really is someone who's going to be an advocate for you and almost a sponsor for you in the workplace, and not just give you advice, but also help others see your strengths. So that's kind of an evolution where a lot of that idea of, at least in a corporate environment, mentorship is going. Is there someone in a very senior level who would be willing to advocate for you? To, if you're not comfortable, talking about your own achievements and talents, well, they do that on your behalf, right? And make your leadership more visible in the organization. And I find that very encouraging.
Very, very good. Very interesting. Any other questions, Rosendo?
Yes, there is a comment that says, great to see a wonderful woman on a Women's Month. And there is a question that says, what are some women that you admire, Andrea?
I'll tell you about one that just came up in my Facebook feed today. So a woman, when I lived and worked in Philadelphia, as you can see, this was a significant moment in my life, is finding a place where I could work and be fulfilled and feel like I was doing something good for a community. Her name is Alba Martinez. She is from Puerto Rico. She was the executive director of this nonprofit at a pretty young age. She'd gone to law school, worked as a lawyer, and then immediately took this job leading an organization that was having some challenges, and she really helped bring it back. What I love about Alba to this day is how she would combine her sense of humor, her passions for art and music, her passions for culture and community with this hard work ethic, right? And creative problem solving always. It's like, it's going to be hard to get this thing done. Well, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep trying to find a way to make it happen. And I learned this persistence from her way back many years ago. And today she just left a corporate. So she did also an interesting path, right? Law, CEO of nonprofit. She was a commissioner for the Department of Health in the city of Philadelphia. And then she went on to have a corporate career. And she just left her corporate career to play and record music. So she's also a musician and she's doing all this cultural stuff. So, you know, that I totally admire her commitment to community and her, you know, willingness to follow her passions.
Rosendo, any other questions?
One more question. What should we learn about the Chicago Community Trust?
Great. So I'm going to give you my quick overview of the trust. The Chicago Community Trust will celebrate its 106th year of existence this year. So it's one of the first of now many, many, many hundreds of community foundations across the country. And we are a nonprofit that's dedicated to the well-being of this region. And for the first 100+ years of the trust life, that meant doing many things to raise money and give money to not-for-profits doing good work in a variety of fields. So health, education, arts, all kinds of things. When I got to the trust a little over 2 years ago, the board of the organization had said, you know, we feel like we're spreading our resources too thin and spreading ourselves a bit too thin. We want to focus on something. We want to ask ourselves, if we're responsible for being responsive to the biggest needs in this region and of these communities, what should we be focused on? And how will we know that we're making a difference? So we went through a process of really considering all kinds of different issues that we might put our resources and time and energy behind, and kept coming back to the same thing. When we looked at disparate outcomes in health, disparate outcomes in education, income, all of those things, it just kept coming back to the difference in family assets for white families in this region compared with Latino families and compared with Black families. So we've really decided to focus for the next 10 years on closing the racial and ethnic wealth gap in Chicago. Right now, a white family has 10 times the amount of wealth as a typical Latino family or Black family. And that's a national number. We're actually commissioned a study now to understand what it looks like here in Chicago, and we're working on policy recommendations and advocacy around, you know, systems that can make a difference, and working with small businesses to support, you know, the ecosystem that supports small businesses led by people of color. We're working on community and neighborhood development projects, but with a real lens to how can the Black and Latino leaders in these communities have a seat at the table and have a voice in shaping how these investments and policy decisions get made. So that's what we're up to at the Chicago Community Trust these days.
Thank you. Rosendo, any other questions?
Yes, one more question. As a student and a woman who works for a non-profit organization that run by a man, what is your advice for me?
Huh. That's an interesting mix of information. Do you love what you're doing? Is it enjoyable? Are you learning? I don't know. You know, I've worked for some organizations run by men. Sometimes they're pretty good.
They can be.
They can be pretty
once
good.
in a while. I hope to say that the next president of St. Augustine will be a woman.
I don't know,
That
Dr.
was the last
Gonzalez.
question.
You seem to be doing
That was the last question. I do have Yeah. If you have a couple more minutes,
Sure.
Andrea, you know, you mentioned something that I have also believe in, but very much, and that's that the disparity of wealth is one of the biggest impediments of success. Can you tell me a little bit from your perspective on how this disparity impacts our entire lives, our lives, and the lives of all
Yes.
children?
Yes. I mean, really, if you think about it, um, many families that have gotten to the point where they have stability in their income, stability in their assets, are passing assets on to the next generation, right? It's usually a house that you inherit or some retirement savings that a family might inherit. For many of our families, our Latino and Black families, same here, right? We're not inheriting from
Hmm.
our elders. We're caring for them in
Hmm.
many times, right? In many families, there is no retirement benefit that your parents are enjoying. So you're their retirement benefit, right? And that makes a huge difference. So that might affect what you choose to do in terms of pursuing education.
Hmm.
Um, or if you decide to pursue education that is costly, you end up accruing a ton of debt. And then you finish college with all of this debt. Maybe your classmate who sat right next to you, their parents were able to save for college, to get help from their grandparents for college. They leave, they don't have debt. It affects the kinds of decisions then you make about which jobs you take. So
Hmm.
then, you're forced to take a job that allows you to both pay off your loans and pay your cost of living, which you may or may not be able to pursue things you're passionate about, right? Many
Hmm.
people talk about internships as a way for people to get exposure. Well, sometimes internships don't pay. And who has the privilege of taking those internships and learning and getting those opportunities? Students who don't need to worry about getting paid because they have family support behind them, right? Whereas a student who needs to pay their own way and often is supporting their family while they go to school doesn't have those options. So it just impacts and then when it's time to get a home, well, you don't have the down payment, right? So you're renting instead of
Hmm.
buying. So then the person who bought, they're earning all of this, their house is gaining value. You're still renting, you're not getting from that. And then the next generation, it's a
Hmm.
repetitive cycle. And then often, in Chicago, certainly many of our neighborhoods that are lower income neighborhoods don't even have a bank.
Hmm.
So if you want to have a financial transaction, you're limited to where you can go. And sometimes you end up going to places that charge you huge fees beyond what you should be paying. You don't have assets, so you don't have access to credit. So if you want to start a business, it's much more difficult. It's like all of these things just accrue over time and generation after generation. And so that's why the wealth disparity in this country along racial and ethnic lines is not shrinking, it's growing. It's been growing for the last decade. And it's a real obstacle to everything, right? I mean, we saw it in the pandemic. The
Yes.
families that had some savings were able to get through. The families that didn't and then lost their jobs were in dire straits. We saw people, standing in food lines beyond anything that we've seen here in years. And so it's become much more visible to people, which I think is important. And so what I'm committed to doing in my work life is making sure that that visibility and that momentum that we've got, where people are finally starting to see that this disparity affects all of us,
Yes.
because it is not losing that momentum and continuing to stay focused on those issues and stay focused on the need to address them.
Yes. And thank you for saying that, because I often think that there is a tsunami that is coming our way, because if we think about it, you know, many of the Latino population work in those industries that was greatest impacted. Not only, so they lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Now, not only did they lose their so by losing their jobs, probably the rate of poverty is going to increase. And then furthermore, some of the parents that were going to school had to step out of school, so that is going to delay their education, and that is going
Yes.
to have a trickle effect for many years. And the other thing that I worry about is our children that were in second and third grade, that had to stay home for a year or over a year without the I can't pronounce that word, tutoring or the educational support that they needed in order to stay ahead, because some of the more influential families that were able to, maybe one of their parents were able to provide the education and support that children need. And in the Latino community, that was not necessarily the case. So I see that as a whole, the Latino community level of education is going to be somewhat delayed, which is going to further gap and widen the gap in education attainment, in poverty, incarceration, and all the other things that come with this disparity. And we're going to see it years from now. And it's unfortunate. I hope that our legislators can do something to help our communities, because
I think this is the opportunity to advocate for some real change, right?
Yeah. Andrea, it's been delightful to learn and to speak with you. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
Yes, we're very proud in you joining us in this month in which we honor and celebrate the many women that have really made a difference in this world, and for their contribution to our world and making this world a better place. So,
thank you so much. Gracias a usted. Muchísimas gracias.
Okay. Take care, and I hope that the audience will join us at the next month for the next interview. So, San Agustin is your home. We're here to support you and help you with your education and achieving your educational dreams. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.